Yes, I'm coming.
Wendell! Allison, who are those children? So you moved on. 8 years, Allison. I was gone 8 years and you couldn't wait.
Okay, wait. Before we go any further, because I need you to understand what you just walked into. This is not your average he came back and she moved on story. No, no, no. This goes so much deeper than that. This is about a man who gave up 8 years of his life fighting to get back to everything he loved, and came back to see his wife looking pregnant and with 3 kids calling her mummy. So before this story rearranges something in your chest, go right now, hit that subscribe button for Storytime with Precious, turn on your notification bell, like this video, and drop your country in the comments before we go another word further. 8 years. That is how long Sean Harmon had been gone. Not gone like he moved to another state. Not gone like they needed space. Gone like he evaporated. Yet like the ground opened and swallowed him and left nothing behind. No note, no phone call, no explanation. Just gone. And nobody. Not his closest friends, not his business partners, not the people who had known him for 2 decades, could explain where one of the fastest rising tech billionaires in New York City had disappeared to. But to understand why he left, you need to understand who he was before all of it collapsed. Sean Harmon was not born into money. He grew up in Richmond, Virginia, a neighborhood that didn't give you much room to dream, but also didn't apologize for it. His father, a quiet and principled man who ran a small logistics company, was the kind of man who taught his son that integrity was the only currency that held its value. Sean was barely 20 years old when his father was taken in a devastating road accident. Pick one ordinary morning, one terrible moment, and just like that, the strongest man Sean had ever known was gone. He stood at that graveside, young, raw, barely holding it together, and he made a promise. He was going to build something that couldn't be taken, something permanent, something his father would have recognized as legacy. And Sean Harmon, when he made up his mind, was not a man who moved slowly. He earned a scholarship, got himself through college, landed an internship in Silicon Valley through sheer stubbornness and a resume that was light on experience, but heavy on nerve. Then at 26, he launched a startup in New York City from a shared office space with 2 laptops and a dangerous amount of belief in himself. By 32, Sean Harmon was worth $400 million. Harmon Corp, a cybersecurity and data management firm, had become one of the most sought-after companies in the technology sector. He had a luxury estate in Northern Virginia, a premium high-rise apartment in Manhattan, staff, investors, power, and most importantly, most irreplaceably, he had Allison. Now, let me tell you about Allison Caldwell, because this woman deserves her own entire introduction. She wasn't who you'd expect when you pictured a tech billionaire's wife. She wasn't decorative. She wasn't quiet. She was working as a healthcare administrator at a nonprofit medical clinic when Sean first laid eyes on her. But the night he met her, she was at a charity gala. Sean stopped mid-sentence talking to an investor. His assistant literally had to nudge him. He crossed the room and said exactly 4 words. "You're too stunning." Hi." She looked at him. "That," she said flatly, "was a terrible opener." He laughed, genuinely, fully. The way he hadn't laughed in so long, he'd forgotten what it felt like. They talked the entire night. They started dating 3 weeks later. He proposed 14 months after that, at a small restaurant in Brooklyn with no photographers and no production. Just him, her, and a ring he had chosen himself because he said nobody else knew what she deserved. They were married in 18 months from the night they met, and everyone who attended that wedding, everyone who watched how Sean looked at Allison during the vows, knew. This wasn't performance. This was a man who had found the one thing no amount of money had been able to buy him. Their life together was full, yet not without friction, what honest life is, but full of warmth and ambition and laughter and plans. They wanted children. They were trying. They had everything they needed to build the family they had both quietly been dreaming of their whole lives. And then came a Tuesday. A regular, completely unremarkable Tuesday in October. Sean was in his Manhattan office, working late, reviewing a federal government contract that Harmon Corps had just won. A cybersecurity deal worth over $2 billion. It was the biggest thing his company had ever landed. The kind of deal that changes everything. He was on the phone with his head of legal, a sharp and reliable man named Derek Ramsey, who had been with the company almost from the beginning. "We're solid," Derek told him. "Paperwork is clean. We sign next week." Sean leaned back in his chair. Yes, he felt untouchable. He should not have felt untouchable. Because by the time morning came, 3 black SUVs were outside his building. Agents in suits, a warrant, and handcuffs. They arrested Sean Harmon on charges of federal wire fraud, money laundering, and insider trading. The numbers they cited were staggering. Nearly $90 million, allegedly moved through shell companies connected to Harmon Corps. Sean stood in the lobby of his own building, hands behind his back, and said over and over, quietly, insistently, "This isn't real. I didn't do this." His accounts were frozen before he could call anyone, his assets locked, his company placed under investigation and effectively gutted. Everything. Gone. Before breakfast, Derek fought hard in the days that followed, filed every motion, challenged every piece of evidence. He pushed back on the warrant's validity with everything he had. But whoever had built this case had done so with surgical precision and years of patience. Every angle Derek tried was already covered. Every counter Sean raised was already anticipated. This wasn't just a frame-up. This was a masterpiece of destruction. And then, Sean got a message. Not from the FBI, not from his legal team. A private, encrypted communication sent to a secondary email address that only 2 people in the world knew existed. The message said, "They have a witness. Your lawyer cannot stop this. Disappear tonight or spend the next 30 years in a federal prison for something you didn't do." And attached to that message, files. Dozens of them. Internal emails, wire transfers, correspondence between executives, all pointing to one source. Just a man named Brett Wilkins, CEO of Vantage Group, a massive technology conglomerate that had twice attempted to acquire Harmon Corps. Twice. Both times, Sean had said no. The first time, politely. The second time, less so. And Brett Wilkins was, it turned out, the kind of man who considered a refused acquisition to be a personal insult that required an appropriately devastating response. Sean sat in Derek's office that night, just the 2 of them, the city lights blinking outside the window like nothing in the world had changed, and he read every file twice. Then he looked up at Derek, and Derek said very quietly, "If what those files are saying is true, I can't fight this in court. Not yet. Not without more." Sean said, "How long would it take to build a real case?" Derek looked at him over the edge of his glasses. "Years," he said. So Sean was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I need to not be here while that happens." Derek closed his eyes. "Sean, if they can't find me, they can't convict me. And if I'm free, I can help you build the case." "And Allison?" A long pause. A very long pause. "She'll be safer not knowing," Sean said finally. "If she knows, they'll use her to find me." Derek rubbed his face. She's going to think you abandoned her. I know. Sean, I know. His voice was iron. I know what it costs. But if I'm convicted, I lose everything anyway. And I'm not going to prison for something I didn't do. He went home that night. It was late, past midnight. Allison was asleep. He stood in the doorway of their bedroom for a long time, just watching her, the soft rise and fall of her breathing, her natural hair spread across the pillow. The peaceful stillness of a woman who didn't yet know the world had tilted sideways. He wanted to wake her. He almost did. He put his hand on her shoulder and his mouth opened, and nothing came out. Because if he woke her, she would argue. She would cry. She would refuse to let him go. And he loved her too much to watch her break. So he kissed her temple, soft as a whisper. She stirred, said his name in her sleep. And Sean Harmon walked out of his own home and didn't come back for 8 years. He left behind one thing, a standard savings account in her name with $40,000. He thought it would carry her through 6 months, maybe a year. He told himself this would be over quickly. He was so wrong. The morning after he left, Allison woke up alone, which wasn't unusual. Sean traveled constantly. Early flights, as early meetings. His schedule was relentless. She made coffee, checked her phone. No message. She called. It rang through. She texted. He didn't respond. By noon, she was mildly annoyed. By 4 in the afternoon, she was uneasy. By 7, she called Derek Ramsey. And Derek, bless him, said the 5 most awful words a lawyer can possibly say. Allison, I need you to come in. She sat in his office that night and listened to everything. The arrest, the charges, the disappearance, the frozen accounts. She was very still through all of it, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on a point just past Derek's shoulder. When he finished, she asked, calm and precise, "Is he alive?" Derek hesitated, half a second too long. "I believe so," he said carefully. She nodded once, thanked him, went home, sat on the edge of their bed in the dark, and cried until her body had nothing left to give. 3 days after that, the government froze the joint account. They argued it was connected to the ongoing investigation. The $40,000 Sean had left for her. Locked. Completely unreachable. She had $6,000 in her own personal savings, a car, and a life that had just been stripped down to the studs. She called her cousin Paige, who said yes immediately. "Come, stay, we'll figure it out." And for 6 weeks, she stayed on Paige's couch. 6 weeks before she could feel the edges of her welcome wearing thin, not because Paige was cruel, she wasn't, not at all, but because Allison was not a woman who stayed where she wasn't fully carrying her own weight. She moved out, rented a small room in a shared house, used nearly everything she had for first last month, and security deposit. Then she walked into a staffing agency and came out with 2 jobs, a daytime position at a medical records office, and evening shifts at a bakery supply warehouse, helping close and pack inventory 3 nights a week. She was exhausted before she had even started. She was heartbroken before she had even taken a breath. And she was still building, because that's who she was. She didn't know yet what else was coming for her. She didn't know that in 2 weeks, sitting on the bathroom floor of that shared house, she was going to look at a positive pregnancy test and feel something that words have never fully captured. She was 6 weeks pregnant. She had been 6 weeks pregnant when Sean left. She hadn't known. She sat on that cold bathroom floor and held that test for a long time. She was going to be a mother. Held the thing she and Sean had wanted, had been trying for, had talked about in warm, hopeful whispers in their bedroom at night. It was happening. without him. She pressed her fist to her mouth, and she decided. She was going to keep this baby. She was going to do it alone if she had to. She was going to do it right. But God had other plans. At 9 weeks, she miscarried. Alone, in that small rented room, in the middle of the night. No husband, no family nearby, no one who knew what she was carrying in the first place. She lay there until it was over. And when morning came, she got up, got dressed, went to work. She told no one for weeks. Because what do you say? How do you explain the kind of grief that doesn't have a face? She just kept going. That is the only thing she knew how to do. Keep going. Now. While Allison was quietly holding herself together in Virginia, something else was happening on the other side of the city. Sean's mother, Jocelyn Harmon, was unraveling. Jocelyn was a strong woman by nature. She had raised Sean alone after losing his father. She had worked at a hospital for years without complaint. She had never been the kind of woman who broke easily. But Sean disappearing cracked something open in her. She started drinking. Not dramatically at first, just enough to quiet the thoughts at night. Then more and more. And in the deep middle of one of those blurred, lonely nights, Jocelyn met a man at a bar. She never learned his name. She never saw him again. One night. That was all it was. Weeks later, Jocelyn Harmon realized she was pregnant. At 51 years old. With triplets. The doctors were stunned. She was stunned. She didn't know how to reach the father. She didn't have a name, a face, a number. She told no one. But Allison found out. Because Allison had quietly, consistently stayed in Jocelyn's life, even after Sean vanished. She checked in every few weeks. Called. Showed up. She couldn't abandon Sean's mother. That wasn't something she was capable of. And when she showed up one afternoon and looked at Jocelyn, pale and thin and a stomach that told its own story, she sat down beside her. And Jocelyn, who had been carrying this secret alone, looked at this young woman who had every reason to walk away from all of them. And she told her everything. Allison didn't flinch. She didn't judge. She just took Jocelyn's hand. "Okay," she said quietly. "We'll figure it out." She helped Jocelyn navigate her prenatal appointments. She drove her when she didn't feel well enough to drive herself. She bought groceries and made sure there was food in the house. She became, quietly and without any ceremony, Jocelyn's person. The pregnancy was high risk from the beginning. 3 babies, an older mother, a body already worn by grief and too many sleepless nights. The doctors expressed concern almost immediately. Complications began in the second trimester. But Jocelyn held on. Stubbornly. Quietly. With a fierceness that looked a lot like her son's. At 34 weeks, the babies came. 2 boys and a girl. Small, fierce, loud, alive. Jocelyn held them for 2 days. She looked at their faces and she cried. Happy crying, the deep, desperate kind. And then on a Wednesday morning, just before the sun came up, yet her body, which had been fighting too hard for too long, simply stopped. Jocelyn Harmon passed away quietly, surrounded by the sound of 3 brand new lives. Allison got the call at work. She walked to the break room, sat down. The nurse on the phone said, "Ms. Harmon, we need to discuss the infants. Is there family?" Allison stared at the wall. 3 babies. No mother. An extended family that had made their priorities crystal clear. And then she heard herself say, steadily, without hesitation, "I'm the family. Now, I need you to stop, just for a second. I need you to sit with what just happened." This woman had lost her husband without explanation, lost a pregnancy in the dark and alone, lost her mother-in-law, was living in a shared house and working 2 jobs to keep herself above water. Cat, and she looked at 3 newborn babies, premature, needing everything, Sean's blood, and said, "I'm the family." Not because anyone told her to. Not because she was legally required. Because they were his. And if they were his, they were hers. But the extended family had other ideas. Jocelyn had a small estate, a modest paid-off home, and a life insurance policy. And the moment news spread about 3 newborns and an inheritance, the relatives appeared. Sean had an estranged aunt, a woman named Kendra, whom no one had seen at a family gathering in years, who materialized within the week with a very particular concern for the welfare of the children. She spoke sweetly. She said things like, "This is too much for one person, especially someone who isn't even blood. The foster system has resources, Allison. It's not a bad thing." But Allison had been doing this long enough to know what sweetness that particular flavor was hiding. She went straight to Derek Ramsey. Derek looked at her over the top of his glasses. "You want guardianship of 3 premature infants," he said slowly, "while working 2 jobs and living in a shared house." "Yes." He looked at her. Long. "Give me a week," he said. He got her emergency guardianship within 10 days. She was legally Sean's wife. That made her legally Jocelyn's family. That made those babies hers to protect. She brought them home. Summer and the 2 boys she named Colin and Cody, using names she knew Jocelyn had mentioned quietly during her pregnancy. Home, at the time, was a 2-bedroom apartment Allison had just barely stretched her budget to afford. As she lined 3 second-hand cribs along the wall of the 2nd bedroom, she set up a changing station between the cribs. She researched formula and feeding schedules and how to manage nighttime feeds for multiple infants, alone, on internet searches at 2 in the morning. She learned. She managed. She woke up every 2 to 3 hours through the night. She went to work in the morning on whatever sleep she'd managed. She sold food on weekends. Jerk chicken, macaroni and cheese, sweet potato pies, out of her kitchen, packaging them up and selling through word of mouth and a small social media page just to stretch every dollar further. And she sang to them. She rocked them. She talked to them when they were too small to understand words, just so they would know the sound of her voice and feel safe. Yet by the time Summer and Colin and Cody were 2 years old, they were pulling themselves up on furniture and waddling toward her with their arms raised, saying one word, "Mummy." She didn't correct them. She didn't explain. She just reached down and held them. Because she was their mother in every way that actually counted. And now, 6 years have passed. Those 3 little ones are in school. They're doing homework at the kitchen table. They're arguing over cartoon characters and whose turn it is to pick what's on the TV. They are real. They are whole. They are hers. Meanwhile, across an ocean, Sean Harmon was dismantling a conspiracy piece by piece. He had left the country with a small amount of cash, liquidated from a private account before the arrest. He moved carefully. He lived cheaply. He traveled through Europe under a carefully managed alternate identity, working remotely in cybersecurity, the one field where he could work invisibly if he chose to. He connected with 2 people he trusted completely. An old college friend based in London named Trevor Chandler, who had no ties to Harmon Corps and could move freely in ways Sean could not. And a skilled white-hat cybersecurity analyst named Joel Barrett, who had worked briefly with Harmon Corps on a government project years before. Together, the 3 of them dug. Slowly. Methodically. Every document. Every transaction log. Every shell company Vantage Group had used to construct the false paper trail that buried Sean. Brett Wilkins had been extraordinarily careful. The frame was layered, complex, designed to look airtight from every angle. But there was one thread. There is always one thread. One wire transfer, routed through a subsidiary of a company registered in Luxembourg, that connected the CFO of Vantage Group to the fabricated transactions tied to Harmon Corps. Sean spent 11 months finding that thread, 18 more months verifying it, another year building it into something that couldn't be argued away. By year 6, they had enough. More than enough. They brought it to a federal prosecutor. The right one, carefully vetted, with no connections to anyone in Vantage Group's orbit. The case broke open in the fall of the 7th year. Vantage Group was raided. Its CFO was arrested. Brett Wilkins was charged with securities fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. And Sean Harmon's name, every last letter of it, was cleared. Officially. On record. Publicly. His assets were unfrozen. His company, what remained of it, was restored. The damages awarded were substantial. His billions came back, and the morning his name was officially cleared, Sean did not throw a celebration. He did not hold a press conference. He sat in a small apartment in Amsterdam, and he cried. Then he booked the first flight home. No entourage, no announcement, no warning. He just wanted to walk through a door and see his wife's face. He got the address. He rented an ordinary car at Dulles, pulled up to a modest house on a quiet street. He sat in the car for a moment. He could do this. He was ready. He got out, walked up the path, could hear voices from inside, laughter, something quick and childlike. But he figured it was the TV. He knocked. Footsteps. The door opened. And everything I described at the very beginning of this story happened right there, on that porch, in that afternoon light. His jaw dropped, his heart shattered, and he was wrong about every single thing he thought he was seeing. He was wrong, but he didn't know that yet, and what he said next was going to make you want to reach through the screen. But what she said back is going to make you sit up straight. The man who had survived 8 years of running and fighting and rebuilding stood on a suburban front porch in Virginia and looked at his wife like she had driven something straight through his chest. He stepped back, looked at her stomach, looked past her at the 3 small figures hovering in the hallway, looked back at her face. Allison. Low, controlled, barely. Whose children are those? She opened her mouth. And, his voice cracked on the word, whose baby is that? She was quiet. 1 full second of quiet. Then she said calmly, "Come inside." "I'm not coming inside," he said. "Tell me right now." From down the hallway, Cody's voice cut through the house. "Mummy, who's the man at the door?" Something moved across Sean's face, a pain with no name. His jaw tightened. He repeated the word under his breath. "Mummy." He stepped back again. His voice came out rough and low and cracked at the edges. "So you moved on. You have a whole family. You moved on." "Sean." 8 years, Allison. His voice rose just slightly. "I was gone 8 years and you couldn't." He stopped, pressed his fist against his mouth, breathed. "You couldn't wait." And then, Allison Harmon, who had cried alone in the dark for years, who had worked her body to breaking, who had sat on the floor of a hospital break room and said, "I'm the family," when she had nothing to give, looked at this man and laughed. The kind of laugh that lives right next to tears. The kind of laugh that comes out when something is so enormous and so complicated that your body doesn't know what else to do with it. She turned toward the hallway. Her voice was steady and firm. "Summer." Colin, Cody. Rooms, please. I'll call you for dinner." "But, Mummy." "Now. Please." The footsteps retreated. The house went still. She turned back to Sean, crossed her arms, and said 5 words. Quiet, certain, final. "There is no other man." He stared at her. "Then what is—" "They are not my children." Silence. Real silence. Sean blinked. What? Not biologically mine. He looked confused, still wound up, still defensive against something she hadn't even confirmed yet. Then who do they belong to? Because they called you Fabun? They belong to you, she said. Complete stillness. Sean's mouth opened, closed. That doesn't... Allison, I don't have children. You do now. She held his gaze. Your mother, Sean. He went very still. After you left, she was grieving. She was drinking, and she made a mistake one night with a man she never saw again. Allison's voice stayed level and even. She carried triplets. Something shifted in his face. The anger fell away completely. What came up underneath it was something raw and exposed. My mother... She delivered at 34 weeks. His voice failed him for a moment. Is she... She didn't make it. The words landed like a physical weight on his chest. He grabbed the doorframe. She passed away 2 days after they were born. The delivery was too much. She had been through too much already. He stood very still. His jaw worked. His eyes went red. She's gone. It wasn't a question. Allison nodded, and for a moment, just a short, devastating moment, she watched the strongest man she had ever known come undone completely. He pressed his fist to his mouth. She breathed hard through his nose. Kept his eyes forward because if he let them close, he was going to fall apart right there. Then he looked at her. And the kids. The extended family wanted the foster system, she said. They had ideas about the estate. She said it plainly, without editorializing. I went to Derek. I was your wife. Legally, that made me their family. I petitioned for guardianship. He shook his head slowly. You were barely surviving yourself. I know. Allison, they are your blood, Sean, your mother's children, your siblings. Her voice didn't waver. How was I going to let them go into the system? He looked at her, looked at the house. I'm sorry, he said. The words came out of him like something that had been waiting years to land somewhere safe. I'm sorry. I saw the kids and I saw you and I came in here like it. It's okay. It's not. Sean. Quietly. It's okay. He nodded, but his eyes dropped. To her stomach. Still there. Still round. Still undeniable. He looked up. The pregnancy, Allison. She went still. I understand the children. I understand all of it. I'm grateful. I'm overwhelmed. I'm sorry, but... His eyes went to her stomach again. That's a baby. I need to understand that. And this is the moment. This is the moment where Allison, who had kept everything running for 8 years, who had never once crumbled in front of another person, who had smiled in grocery stores and said a few more months and put 3 children to bed and then pressed her palm to her own body in the quiet of the night, went very quiet. Something shifted in her expression. Not grief, not fear, and something closer to the relief of being seen. Allison! His voice dropped. What is that? She looked at him, like she was deciding how to carry this next part. Then she said, soft and even, the way you say things you have learned to simply live with. It's not a baby. He stared. It's a fibroid tumor. Large. It's been growing for 3 years. Sean didn't speak. It's... Something flickered in her eyes, almost a smile. Apparently the size of a full-term pregnancy, which is why strangers keep asking me when I'm due. His face drained of color. 3 years. I was going to have the surgery. You've been walking around like this for 3. The cost was significant even with insurance, and every dollar I made went to the children. Allison, and I was not going to take food off their table for... Stop! His voice broke. Stop. Just stop talking. She stopped. And Sean Harmon, who had survived a federal frame-up, 8 years underground, a multi-billion-dollar conspiracy, and years of living like a ghost, sat down on the front porch step. Just sat down, like the ground had gone soft beneath him, and put his head in his hands. Because he finally understood it, all of it, every piece, while he was across an ocean chasing his billions and building his revenge and clearing his name. She was here. No money, no husband, no mother-in-law, 3 infant siblings she had chosen to raise because love demanded it, a body being slowly destroyed by something she couldn't afford to treat. And not one person in the world knew the full weight of what she was carrying. Not one. She had held it all, completely alone, because she was Allison Harmon. And Allison Harmon did not abandon what she loved, not even when it cost her everything. Not even when there was nothing left to hold on to. Not even when he was gone. He looked up at her. His eyes were full. His voice barely functioned. Why didn't you tell someone? Derek, Paige, anyone? She looked at him simply. You weren't here. That was all. 3 words. He wasn't here. So she handled it. Because that is what love does when it has no other option. It handles it. He stood up slowly. He reached out and touched her face. She let him. I'm here now, he said. She looked at him. 8 years in her eyes. 8 years of grief and work and sacrifice and a love that had nowhere to land. She chose 3 words. I know, Sean. Behind her, the sound of small feet, a door cracking open, Summer's voice, she carrying that particular tone of a child who has waited the absolute maximum amount of time she is capable of waiting. Mummy, is that man staying for dinner? Sean looked over Allison's shoulder, at this little girl with his mother's eyes and his mother's stubborn jaw. He cleared his throat. If Mummy says it's okay, he said. Summer regarded him with deep, serious assessment. Do you like mac and cheese? He almost smiled. It's my favorite. She considered this information, nodded once. Okay, you can stay. And she disappeared back down the hallway with the confidence of someone who has just resolved a matter of great importance. Allison shook her head slowly, just slightly, a small smile at the corner of her mouth. He looked at her. And for the first time since he had walked up that path, now with his broken assumptions and his broken heart and his whole complicated, painful, beautiful life coming back to him all at once, something in his chest loosened, just enough to breathe, just enough. The next morning, Allison came downstairs before 6. The kitchen light was already on. Sean was at the table, laptop open, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and urgent. She reached past him and put the kettle on. He looked up, held up one finger. I need the top fibroid specialists in the country. Boston, Mayo, Johns Hopkins, I don't care about location. I need 3 names, and I need them available for a call by noon. He paused. Today, Joel. I said noon today. He hung up, looked at her. Sit down. I'm making tea. Allison. Something in his voice. She sat. He turned the laptop toward her. I need every medical file you have. Yeah, every scan, every result, the surgeon's report, all of it. She looked at the screen, looked at him. Sean? I'm not arguing with you about this. His voice was steady, firm, not harsh, firm, the way a person sounds when they have already made a decision and the decision is final. You spent 8 years taking care of everything and everyone else. You are not going to spend one more single day in pain when I have the resources to change that. So, files. She looked at him for a long moment, and something in her, some weight she had been holding up alone for so long she had forgotten it had a name, quietly, slowly, came down. She went upstairs, came back with a folder. 3 years of medical documents, scan results, consultations, a surgeon's assessment from 18 months ago that she had filed away because she couldn't afford to act on it. She put it on the table. He opened it, started reading. Then he reached for his phone. By noon, he had 3 consultations scheduled. By the following week, a fibroid specialist from Johns Hopkins had flown to Virginia for an in-person assessment. By the end of that month, a surgical team had been assembled, and Allison Harmon went into surgery. Now. This was not a small procedure. It was long. It was delicate. It required the kind of precision that is not available to everyone. And Sean sat in that waiting room for 11 hours. He did not leave, not to eat, not to walk the halls. He sat in one chair and he waited. Yes, he prayed in a way he had not prayed since the night he stood in his own doorway, watching his wife breathe and made the worst decision of his life. He sat there and he thought about everything. 3 infants in second-hand cribs. A woman selling food from her own kitchen to keep 3 children fed. A woman standing in a checkout line letting strangers ask her when she was due because explaining the truth cost more energy than she had left. A woman who went to court to claim 3 babies as her family when she had every reason in the world to look the other way. He sat there, and he thought about every single night she had sat alone. Every night she had been in pain. Every morning she had gotten up and kept going anyway. And he thought about the fact that he had almost walked away. That he had stood on that porch, had looked at the person who had been the realest thing in his life and sacrificed every comfort she had to protect his blood. And he had almost turned his back on her. Because he assumed. He assumed without asking. He assumed the worst about the best person he had ever known. What a fool. What a complete fool he had almost been. The surgeon came out at hour 11, calm, measured. "Mr. Harmon, she's out of surgery. It went very well. She'll make a full recovery." Sean put his face in his hands. He sat in that waiting room chair, and he cried. Not from sadness, from relief so enormous it had nowhere else to go, from gratitude that felt too big for his body to hold, from 8 years of everything coming off his shoulders at once. She was going to be okay. She was going to be okay. When they let him in to see her, she was still foggy from anesthesia, eyes half open. She turned her head toward him, blinked slowly, said a little fuzzy around the edges, "You're still here." He sat on the edge of the bed, took her hand in both of his. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. She hummed, almost smiled. "Prove it," she murmured. He looked at her, at this woman, his wife, his person. "Give me the rest of my life," he said quietly. She was already drifting back toward sleep, but her hand tightened around his, and that was enough. Recovery took several weeks, and those weeks were some of the most unexpectedly peaceful of Sean's life. He was there for all of it. He learned their routines, all of them. They renewed their vows 6 months after the surgery. Not a grand production. Intimate. 8 years. We survived 8 years. She said her vows without notes. She had written them herself, in the margins of a notebook, over several evenings after the children went to sleep. She said, "I didn't wait for you because I had to. I waited because you were worth it. I kept your family because they were worth keeping. I love you not because my life is uncomplicated with you in it, but because it is more mine when you're here. So don't go anywhere foolish again." Laughter. Tears. Sean with his jaw tight and his eyes red and the biggest smile she had ever seen on his face. He said his vows. He said he was choosing her, the children, this family, every single day. He said he understood now what wealth actually meant. He said he was not going anywhere. He meant every word. Had he said it the way a man says something when he has traveled 8 years the hard way, and finally arrived somewhere he should never have left. About a year after the vow renewal, Allison came downstairs early in the morning and found Sean in the kitchen. She put a small box on the table in front of him. He looked at it, looked at her. She said nothing. He opened the box, looked at the test inside. 2 lines. Clear, undeniable, real. He looked up at her. She looked back at him. And this time, her eyes were soft and shining and she was smiling. "Is this?" he started. "Real," she said. "Yes." He stood up. He held her. The kind of hold that doesn't leave room for anything else. She pressed her face into the side of his neck and breathed. He pressed his lips to her temple. Same spot. Same woman. Different day. Same love. Yet when they told the children, Summer stood up from the table with both hands above her head and screamed. Pure, theatrical, 7-year-old joy with no volume control. "I told you! I said it was a girl! It's Lily! We are naming her Lily!" Cody said, "How do you know it's a girl? It's probably a boy. Boys are stronger." Summer stared at him. "I prayed for a sister." "That's not how that works." Colin, very quietly, without looking up from his cereal. "I also prayed for a sister." A pause. Cody looked between them. Sighed. "Fine," he said. "Lily." It was a girl. Healthy, round, loud from the first breath. Born on a Tuesday morning in the spring, which felt to Sean like the universe trying to give him a better Tuesday to think about. They named her Lily Jocelyn Harmon, the middle name for the grandmother she would never meet, but would grow up hearing about, because Sean made sure of that. He told them about Jocelyn the way you tell children about important people, honestly, with love, with the understanding that their history matters and the people who came before them were real and worth knowing. Sean looked around his living room one evening. Lily was asleep on his chest, warm and impossibly small. Summer and Colin were at the table. Summer helping Colin with a reading assignment, which she was taking entirely too seriously, and he was tolerating with remarkable patience. Cody was on the floor arguing at a video game under his breath. Allison was in the kitchen, moving between the counter and the stove, humming something soft to herself. Sean sat there and thought. He thought about $400 million. He thought about 8 years. Yeah, he thought about the frame-up and the evidence and the lawyers and the chase. He thought about all of it. Every sacrifice, every risk, every desperate year he had spent fighting to get back what was taken from him. He thought about the billions that were now his again. And then he looked around this room and understood, fully, completely, with no ambiguity, that not $1 of it, not one deal, not one victory in any boardroom or courtroom on any continent, came close to this, not even in the same universe as this. He had spent 8 years believing his wealth was something you counted in accounts. It wasn't. Real wealth was this. 3 children doing homework and arguing and growing into people of character. A baby sleeping on his chest who had no idea yet how loved she was. A woman in the kitchen who had been given every reason to stop loving him, and hadn't. Not once. Not for a single day. He had almost walked away from all of it. He had stood on that porch and assumed the worst about the best person he had ever been given. And he had almost turned his back on her. Over assumptions, over pride. Over 5 minutes of not asking a question before making a judgment. He shook his head slowly at himself. Allison came around the corner, saw him. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. She looked at him. "You have your thinking face." "I always have my thinking face. This is a specific thinking face." She sat beside him, looked at the baby, touched Lily's tiny hand with one finger. "What are you thinking about?" He was quiet for a moment, then he said, "How close I came to being an idiot." She glanced sideways at him. "You were an idiot for approximately 4 minutes on that porch," she said. We've discussed this. I know. And you've been very not an idiot since then. I'm working on maintaining that. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Good, she said. Keep it up. He pressed his lips to the top of her head. She closed her eyes. And the room was full of the particular kind of noise that means a family is alive. Someone had knocked over something in the kitchen. Cody said it wasn't him. Summer said it obviously was. Colin said nothing, but his expression said everything. Sean laughed. Allison laughed. Lily slept through all of it, completely unbothered, already at home. Before you go, I have to ask you something, because this story has a lot of moving pieces, and I want to know what you think. If you were Allison Kiddo, husband gone without a word, accounts frozen, pregnant alone, would you have held on the way she did? Would you have taken in those babies? Or would you have made different choices? And what about Sean? He disappeared to protect himself, and arguably to protect her, too. He left her with nothing, and didn't find a way to tell her he was alive. Did he make the right call? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know what side you're on. And while you're down there, subscribe to Storytime with Precious right now if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. Like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Check out the other stories on this channel because we are nowhere near done. Now, and this is the part where I have to talk to you directly, because this story, with all its pain and its sacrifice and its turns, ends with one truth that I want you to carry when you walk away from it. Real love is not a feeling you fall into. It is a choice you make when the feeling is nowhere to be found. It is a decision you make when every reasonable, logical, self-protective part of you is saying there is nothing left to give. Allison had nothing. She had no money, no guarantee, no proof that Sean was coming back, no assurance that any of it would ever be okay. And she chose to love anyway. She chose to protect what she loved. She chose to raise 3 children who were not biologically hers because they were his blood, and his blood was hers to keep. She carried an illness rather than put fear on those children. She worked herself to the edge because it was what the moment required, and she never asked for a witness. She never performed it for anyone. She just did it. Because love that needs an audience is not love. Love is what you do when no one is watching, when there's no reward coming, when you're tired and broke and hurting and you do it anyway. That is the real thing. Sean fought for 8 years to get his billions back. And the most important thing he learned at the end of all of it? His true wealth had been right here the entire time. In a woman who stayed loyal not just by waiting, but by doing something with that wait. By protecting everything he cared about even when it cost her everything she had. That is not just loyalty. That is love as an act of will. And whatever you're going through right now, whatever waiting room you're sitting in, whatever season is asking more of you than you think you have to give, I want you to remember Allison Harmon and what she built in the quiet, when nobody was watching, when she had no guarantee, when all she had was love and the decision to honor it. That is the whole lesson, right there. Thank you for watching this one to the very end. Take care of yourselves, and take care of the people in your life who show up for you, because not everyone does. And the ones who do are everything.